Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where we view and review every single Palme d'Or winner in random order. And today, we are going back to the very first year of the Palme d'Ors with the film Ziegfeld Follies from 1945. It's one of the many winners from 1945. I cannot wait to get all those early movies out of the way. There's a bunch of them. Some of them you've heard of, some of them that, like this one, you maybe haven't. We are going to talk about what makes this film special and different from pretty much every single other film that we've talked about on this show. There's one notable reason why this film stands out, and we're going to get into it. But first, I need to remind you what we talked about a little while ago before we went on our holiday hiatus. It's been more than a week or so. We reviewed Uncle Boonmee, who recalls his past lives from a Pitchapong Receptacle, and it got an 8.2 out of 10. So that puts it at the third spot on our list, pretty high up there. We'll see if it stays up there over the course of the course of this show.
Always coming from the spot.
Hello.
Yeah, it's gonna race to the top.
Some might say it's closer than it ever will be.
That's true.
Fair. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And, I'm just feeling like rocking right along. Flip the page, as this film does, in between segments. Abram, do you have a featured comment from last time?
I even have it pulled up. This comes from now frequent submitter to Quest for the Bestest friend of the show, Abby, who writes the following about Uncle Boonmee. This was a great review, and I'm glad you all appreciated this movie, though you weren't exactly sure what it was trying to say fully. A few pieces that weren't discussed that I've been grappling with are the film's bookends, the introduction of the water buffalo, and Jen and Tong at the end. I really love the synthesis of the quote at the beginning, quote, "Facing the jungle, the hills, and the vales, my past lives are as an animal and other beings rise up before me." I read that wrong, but it's fine. You can go back and read the comment. You're instantly asked the question, who was or is this water buffalo? Just like with Taste of Cherry, the question of how time exists, especially in a filmic sense, is put forth by the narrative. Time seems to exist all at once here, where a break from the narrative in The Princess and the Fish is not announced as flashback and only inferred as a past life of Uncle Boonmee. In the ending with Jen and Tong, there is a split in reality as they both continue to watch the television and go to get something to eat. Perhaps this is a look at the viewer who is trapped in the cinematic illusion as a viewer, but at the same time experiencing another's, quote, life as their own. Uncle Boonmee definitely still eludes me as well, but I think to some extent that's the point. As we get closer to some sort of understanding of ourselves in life, it gets further away. Very, very good comment. Again, as usual, not done justice my reading aloud ability. Yes. So go check out the comment. Abby actually wrote more than that, but we need to get into the heart of the matter.
The true meat of Ziegfeld Follies.
Yes.
Would somebody like to attempt a plot synopsis of this here film?
I have something to read out.
Okay,
here synopsis. We go. And it is a quote from one of the first things said in this movie. Fred Astaire appears on stage referring to his great friend Flo Ziegfeld, and he says, "He never cared so much about villains, plots, stories. The Follies never had a story. The Ziegfeld Follies was a story of an era. It was gay, bright, beautiful, and that's how Ziggy wanted it." Sure. And that is accurate.
Yeah,
that is an accurate synopsis, not only of, presumably, the real-life Ziegfeld Follies, but also the film Ziegfeld Follies that we have now seen twice, because we watched this 3 weeks ago to prepare, and then timing all got messed up, and so we had to watch it again, or at least refresh ourselves a little bit on what had happened. And the answer is nothing, because this is a variety act film. It is frankly, it's a great adaptation. This is best adaptation, best adapted screenplay here for Palme d'Or. Because it's just what the Ziegfeld Follies would have been like, but portrayed filmically, with the added benefit of set design and a little bit of camera work, which could not have been done on the stage. But it's just a variety act. You know, it's got some comedy, got some dancing, got some singing, got some racial stereotypes that aren't very fun to watch in this day and age. But it hits all the boxes of Ziegfeld Follies, but dare I say, not many of the boxes of what I would consider to be a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who wants to give their first thoughts on this review this little variety piece.
Demo?
It being the only plotless film that we've yet to come across.
I mean, I can go first. I mean, I don't like Ziegfeld's Follies, but I don't think any of us do, right? I think this is kind of a strange film to talk about in that it's technically proficient in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Tucker, you even mentioning to me earlier today, I mean, the production design in some sequences, I would say some opposed to others,
Yes.
is quite staggering. And taken on their own, I think a lot of the individual acts are quite compelling. But for me, it doesn't add up to anything other than pretty much straight up monotony.
Yeah.
Especially because I'm just not moved by a lot of the non-comedic sequences. And even the comedic sequences, I think, are very uneven.
Sure.
I think that this is an effectively made movie. But I just don't really see anything for me outside of the Guzzler's Gin sequence, which we'll talk about, to even really grab onto. I don't know. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think that there's anything that makes this to me, and you said these words earlier, Timo, makes this movie special. You can contextualize it as impressive for the time through the lens of the production design.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think a lot of the camera work is not particularly interesting. I think a lot of the sets are actually quite threadbare in contrast to the very elaborate ones in particular numbers. So I don't know. I got nothing to say about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to try and like broach the topic of reviewing this film because it is so much different than anything else we've talked about in these. How long has this series been going? 10, 12 years?
140
years.
yeah.
Holy shit.
In any case, it is just like, because I've seen anthology films before, but those tell, short stories, and some of these, and obviously these do too in their own way.
This ain't no French Dispatch.
It ain't no French Dispatch. It ain't your mama's French Dispatch anyway.
Ain't no Stories of a Woman. What was that movie from the Oscars a couple years ago?
3 women, something like that. I don't know. Tell it like a woman. There you go. Anyway, so. But to like talk, so what? It's difficult to like broach where to start with this film, and I guess we should at the beginning. That's the best place of any. The opening after a little introduction by Fred Astaire, as Tucker mentioned. We open on Ziegfeld, our good friend.
It's the other way
Ziegfeld.
around. It's the flow thing, and then he's
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you know who it introduces? My great friend Fred Astaire.
That's right.
Enter Fred Astaire.
That's right. A good friend.
Playing
Florence
himself.
Ziegfeld, reprising his role from The Great Ziegfeld, which we watched years and years ago.
Kind of a sequel.
Technically. But anyway, he's in heaven. We go past what we see, the heavenly gates, the heavenly estates, I guess, of somebody. Gandhi is there. I know that. Right?
What? No, it's Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. That's right. It's Shakespeare.
Where'd you get Gandhi?
I don't know.
Where does Gandhi come
Which is
into
also
this? He
very
didn't
funny
tell
in
stories.
if you think about it, because that implies that Gandhi went to Christian heaven.
No, but it's this like progression.
He's not in the
of
movie.
The history of theater.
That's
from
right.
Shakespeare to
Somebody.
something in the middle, and then Flo Ziegfeld.
Oh, it was P.T. Barnum.
Barnum,
P.T.
and
Barnum.
then
Because it
Ziegfeld.
was sort of like a meeting of great writing and storytelling, and then the great spectacle of P.T. Barnum,
Sure.
and then who is the child of these two great minds but Florence Ziegfeld.
Well, that's probably how he saw himself.
Exactly. This film, obviously that opening is very much inflating the ego and the presence and the iconography of Florence Ziegfeld, as he's like, oh, the impact that I've had in my life, and now I'm sitting here in heaven. But if I could do one more great Ziegfeld show, what would it be?
Yeah.
And that's the framing device for this. Is like, this is the ultimate Ziegfeld show.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, I find that probably the most compelling
Yeah.
element of this film. Structurally, filmically, what it stands as, outside of a few of specific sequences that I do think are actually quite good. The idea of having this be I think it's like 15 years after Ziegfeld died, putting it back on the silver screen, recapturing that energy of 15 years ago. Remember how great it was, and the idea of Ziegfeld looking down from heaven, and obviously William Powell back, because we the audiences of the time relate William Powell with Flo Ziegfeld, and him being like, yeah, if I were to update it for the modern day and include some modern stars and some of my favorites and kind of make it a best of, I think it's an interesting idea. But the problem is, it is just the opening idea. I think that, for me, this film is equal parts compelling on like a philosophical level, which I'll get to, but subjectively just not interesting at all, because already I don't really like stage performances that much. I'm not into Broadway. I don't really care about dancing or singing. And so this
Or fun.
or fun or friends or family or love. But so the scenes, most of them don't really appeal to me. But the idea of framing it around Ziegfeld's last Follies post-mortem is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But they don't do anything with that.
We don't bookend it.
No, we don't even bookend it. But I was thinking even farther, in between each one, a short 30-second thing of William Powell in his little funny thing and his costume.
They could only get him for a morning, apparently.
That's true. In a set that's built up and all that.
Yeah.
But if each sequence was him kind of picking up his toys and putting them together and like painting a background and like saying, "Oh, I want some satin. I want some elephants or whatever it is," and then like piecing these together, and then we are able to see from the mind of Florence Ziegfeld visualized on screen with actors like Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire on stage. I think that would have made this feel a little bit more purposeful. But as it stands, that's just the beginning idea. So again, interesting idea at the beginning, maybe one of the most interesting parts of the film. But because it's never brought up again, it feels like the beginning feels like an afterthought.
Yeah.
It's like a before thought.
Here's what I want to do. I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves.
I didn't give
that's
my
what I was
thoughts.
going to say. We gotta throw it to Timo.
Oh, sorry.
Throw it to Timo.
You know, you guys make good points, but I think that this film is it's boring, it's unfunny, it did not age well, and it actually, well, the review thing, the idea of the review, REVUE, not what we do on this show, but it's just so dated. It's just a concept that is like not part of our modern film viewing and our modern film canon. And so it's kind of a slog to watch, even when I can appreciate a number of dance sequences for, good choreography, interesting looking sets. But then again, there are other dance sequences that I just do not care about and go on and on. And even the comedic sections are just like, they're not that funny. Like, I don't know. There's one of them, I think, that is a little bit funny. But, okay, let's talk about my most hated one,
great.
which is, I'm going to just jump right into it. Hello, the operator one?
I don't like it
Number?
either. I hate that one too.
I thought it was funny.
It's just not funny. It's like, I don't know if this is, maybe that, like, since we don't have to deal with operators anymore, and like this humor is just so elapsed from our society. But even the way it ends, like he gets the bill and he eats the phone. It's so like random, and it's in these like those couple of sketches, except for the one about the lottery ticket, in which we have this like really bare bones, like really, really sparse set that doesn't do very much at all, that makes me sitting there having to watch this static shot of the comedian read unfunny comedy bits, kind of like pulling teeth. It's kind of not fun at all. But I mean, there are sequences that I actually think are really beautiful. The non-Chinatown sequence with Fred Astaire and what's her name, Lucille Bremer, that one, I think that's very beautiful. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there, and that one has a little inkling of story that I can get with. It's like, this movie is just something else. That's all I really have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think
about
the two you're contrasting, Timo, are really good ones to bring into conversation, just in that it does illustrate what feels like a very strange sort of disjunction in quality from sequence to sequence.
Absolutely.
That doesn't really make sense, because when we're in that operator scene, there is this will only make sense to Tucker. There's a 1-2 switch quality.
Yes.
About how these are put together.
Yes, colored background, miscellaneous objects in the foreground, actor.
We're supposed to understand that we're in a hotel lobby because there's a revolving door and there's a pillar.
Yes.
And otherwise, we're just in this void, which is made weird by the fact that other sequences are so much more elaborate.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Okay, so as a thespian, let's say.
I wouldn't accuse you of being anything else.
Yes. As someone who did,
That was an insult, by the way. It sounds rude.
a thespian?
Thespian, yeah, it sounds like an insult.
It's a good thing.
I don't know. Anyway, as someone
someone
who
who likes
did,
the theater.
drama,
it's an insult.
one-person group theater of all these things, I understand maybe what they were going for with some of the sparse set dressing here, in that it's very reminiscent of like a one-man show kind of thing, where you're like,
Pat Hazel's Wonder Bread Years.
exactly, where you get like a prop and the audience imagines the rest. but it's incongruous, not only because some of them have that sort of set dressing and some of them don't, the comedy bits, but also because the musicals don't have that at all. They're giant and elaborate. So it's like it's incongruous to me to be like, well, the comedy ones are like a one-man show, very sparse, except not all of them. And then the musical ones are like giant, extravagant. We're going all out.
Yeah.
Like, why couldn't you have just done a hotel, do a hotel lobby, or I don't know, you have to do various sets for the pay the $2 one.
Yeah.
Even though, as Abram and I noted, in the pay the $2 sequence,
it is a lot more
Yes.
elaborate than the hotel one.
yeah.
There's like a train car set, and then there's a
the
courtroom
jail,
set, and like
Phenomenal.
the bars go like 20 feet in the air, like they go off the screen even during a wide
It's
shot. Yeah,
expressionist.
it's very interesting, but like I just don't feel like that production design is applicable, or there feels to be the same scale of things
Yeah.
across all of the sequences.
It's interesting because I don't find myself critiquing the production design as much as you guys do, because I think that in its variety, it offers a lot to look at in terms of they feel very different, because between each and every one, it could be something as simple as a guy sitting in front of a void with a couple things to sort of suggest the location, or it can be the
Interior of an apartment.
Well, the sequence where I think it's Fred Astaire and some other woman, and there's like all this red stuff in the background, and people are dancing around these trees, and they're like gliding along. It's very elaborate, but I think that juxtaposition.
yeah, that's
is
the one
nice.
that I was talking about with Lucille
Okay.
Bremer.
This Heart of Mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
I found the sort of expressionist, surrealist idea of the distance between them to be pretty compelling, because especially on something like the Guzzler's Gin set, it is just enough to where there was obviously effort put in. There's a guy in the background sitting as a thing. He doesn't need to be there. The table and the bottle and his hat and it's all used to great effect. And I found that, especially combined with the Technicolor, to be sort of I don't know if you guys have seen their films, but Powell and Pressburger have these large, elaborate, very sometimes very simple but drenched in color and costume design sets that are very surrealist, and I find something very, very unique about that, especially considering that is kind of what you would be able to accomplish on a stage. They are mimicking the different kinds of stage performance.
Yes,
when you're
of
doing a
course.
comedy performance on a stage, you're not doing a huge crazy set. You're doing something very simple, but when it's something for a musical or a dance sequence, stages are going to have all sorts of crazy stuff going on, like we saw in The Great Ziegfeld.
Yeah,
when we saw
but
those.
Here's the issue. This is the broader issue with the film.
rub.
Is that it's not a stage play. You're adapting it to the medium
It's
of
a
film.
movie, and it knows it's a movie in other
Yeah.
sections.
Well, I think it's interesting where they choose to delve into the filmic elements of it and don't. And don't is much more where it ends up.
Yeah.
Because there's basically no editing in this film. I mean, almost every sequence is a one take. The
Yeah.
few that don't use editing to any specific effect. Like, we're not getting close-ups or wide shots necessarily. It'll be something like the paying the $2 sketch that has multiple locations. And
Like, we're
then
just jumping between-
we fade in between each of them. But I found that very interesting, because I think that, again, it is intended to simulate that stage experience. And I think to some effect it usually does, of being able to see these performers do
Yes.
their performances in one take. You're like, Jesus Christ, Judy
It's
Garland
impressive.
memorized
Listen,
so much dialogue.
Yes, it's impressive. That is not
Yeah.
to be doubted. And let's be clear that the performances from that regard and the choreography from that regard is all very impressive.
The dance numbers and the tap.
But at the end of the
dancing is,
day,
like, it's
we are
good.
here to review these films as films.
Well, here's where I would want to draw in the philosophical element that I mentioned
Okay, here we
earlier.
go.
Is I do not like this film because it does not have a narrative, because it is structured very differently from the films that I like.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say we're reviewing films as films, I do think that is a little bit limiting. Not that I disagree with you,
Okay.
but that
You're
film...
playing devil's advocate here.
I kind of am. But it's a philosophical devil's advocate. Film can
often
be
are.
used for so much more than just narrative. We have reviewed over 100
absolutely.
narrative films here.
Yeah.
But this is the first time we are forced to reckon with someone using film for something that is other than just a narrative. And so
Well, yeah.
I find this film very compelling from that regard, because I would not watch this film if I was not forced to review it or talk about it for this discussion. But I do think that film can be used for so much more than just narrative. But our modern understanding, and frankly, the understanding for most of history, is just film is for narrative. You're telling a story. There's sequences, there are characters, there are character arcs. But that's not necessarily true. And so I do think I give this film a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in terms of where it sits in like the possibility of film. Not only my personal enjoyment, but I think it is very cool what they did here in terms of rejecting the traditional notion of what a film needs to be good.
I hear you, but I don't think that's necessarily because this film is particularly interesting. And I think
I agree. Yeah.
But I think my issue is if you're going to make a non-narrative film, that's fine, but it needs to then leave something with you. An emotional feeling, a sense of wonder or captivation, or something to grab onto in the absence of narrative.
There's, the concert film is one that I keep going back to. Talking Heads, Stop
This
Making
is the year
Sense
of
as a
concert films after
non-narrative.
We had the re-release of
Yes, this is
Last year. It's
Oh
2024,
shit,
right?
you're right. 2023.
We do live in the
when
new
we
year.
first watched this film was the year of concert films. Stop Making Sense re-release, the Eras Tour, Renaissance.
And films like that actually do leave a lot with me. I mean, I really love Stop
Yeah.
Making Sense. And there's no narrative, but there's like escalation. We go, we build and we build and we build. And there's a couple sequences that build here, but you get, maybe 20 minutes maximum in one sequence, and then you're out, and it doesn't even matter. And you're on to the next
I want to be clear. I'm not specifically saying that like this film's bad because it doesn't have any story, because obviously it doesn't. But when you're comparing it to something like, I want to bring into to conversation the most recent of these concert films that I just mentioned that I have seen, Renaissance, a film by Beyonce, which does the same. It interflows these musical sequences with not so much like comedy bits, obviously. Not like Beyonce isn't doing like slapstick numbers, but she's
No stand-up?
I would have seen it.
It's more behind the scenes stuff, but there is a thematic flow to it that feels very intentional rather than, and now for something completely different.
Yeah.
And I understand the variety show value in doing that, but it's just not engrossing, I suppose.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, take something like Fantasia. I think that what this ends up lacking is any sense that the medium of film is being used in a particularly inventive way.
Yeah,
To your point, there's not especially great or obvious editorial hand. There's also very little work done with the camera in an interesting way.
Yeah.
There's one sequence that we were talking about last night, Tanner. It's the big like Thief and the Princess dance number, for lack of a better term. I don't remember the name of it, but as the
It's the heart one. It's the
that
one
one.
that we
Okay.
keep going back to.
As the camera kind of follows us in and out of these sets, as you made the point to me, and I think it was a great point, Tanner. It is this cinematic interpretation of a stage transition, and there are moves like that you could see as compelling, but there's no. I don't feel like any real sense of cohesive vision to this, or in the case of something like Fantasia, no real.
What are you saying? Wait, Flo Ziegfeld didn't create this with his own two hands?
No, Tucker, he was dead for 15 years.
What do you mean there's 5 listed
Warren
directors?
Ziegfeld's been dead for 15 years.
It just, I don't really feel any sort of emotional connection.
Yeah.
Where you might feel that in a Fantasia number, even some of the more abstract ones. And I think that partially is because, to your point you just made, Timo, this is a film made by a lot of people to celebrate a concept that is no longer useful to
Absolutely.
us.
Yeah.
I was remarking to Tanner that I saw a video of a dad throwing bricks at his son who was dodging them in a soccer net doing cartwheels. That's the kind of thing I find entertaining now, right? So there's always going to be a massive disjunction between what I would put in a variety TikTok show and this.
Is TikTok Is TikTok the modern Ziegfeld?
I was genuinely, literally thinking about this while I was watching the film or something. I'm like, where have variety shows gone? Like the idea of going to a theater and seeing on the big silver screen a comedy number, a dance number, a couple different stars, and I'm thinking we don't get that anymore. And then I was also thinking, would we go see it if there was a sequence that was a short Star Wars film, a short Marvel film? I'm just trying to bring in the things that are popular today.
Yes.
If there was a 90-minute thing that was 10 minutes from a couple different things that are popular today, would we go see that? And the answer to me was probably not, because again, I go to films for narrative, for character progression, for performances that evolve over the course of a film, and that idea lacked. And I'm like, well, the answer is this idea has just been short formed into Vine and TikTok and, and YouTube Shorts.
Put it here for a second, Tucker.
Okay.
I wanted actually Tucker's handshake because you sparked something in me, right?
Here we go.
Because we kind of do have that in Star Wars Visions.
I was going to say Star Wars Visions and What If.
But the reason I bring up Star Wars Visions, and for people who don't know, it's essentially an anthology series of short films on Disney Plus, all made by very different anime creators.
Yeah.
And part of what makes that so interesting is that everybody's creative voice is different.
Yeah.
And you see a different lens.
Sure.
But I do think that you could probably watch this film and say, okay, there were actually two directors here.
Sure.
One was putting together all of these dance numbers, and one was working on the comedic sketches. It doesn't really feel like there is a level of variety in approach that's sort of reflective of the number of cooks in the kitchen,
Sure.
I would say.
Yeah, well, I think that you are all getting to a point that Mr. Red Skelton with Guzzler's Gin makes, and it's in the title card, because the title card reads, Red Skelton will show you what will happen when television comes. It is like a warning. It is foreboding. It is, remember in the age of radio, you could have these, your advertiser programs, and maybe your guy could be sauced up behind the mic, and you might tell, you might not tell. They often were. But in TV, that is not going to fly. And it's going to be horrible to watch. To me, that whole segment basically reads like the film heads, the kino heads are like, TV sucks. TV's going to be horrible. You're going to hate it. TV's full of drunks and fake poets and like...
Yeah,
that's
sure.
why
Like,
that
film wasn't
segment
full of drunks at this time.
Yeah.
Clark Gable
and fake poets.
So who's the guy who played Robin Hood? Who's that guy?
Errol Flynn.
Yeah, Errol Flynn. He was also notoriously a horrible alcoholic.
I believe Orson Welles also.
Orson Welles, yes.
Well, and the studio that made this, right? Was it MGM?
I don't remember.
Let's find out. Hang on.
Whoever the studio was, they had Judy Garland on so many pills.
Yeah.
I don't know. She seems
MGM.
like she's on
MGM
meth
Ziegfeld
during
Follies.
this.
It's like clear as day on the
Yeah.
Panther. Yeah. Oh,
Her segment is like, she seems kind of crazy. She seems like she's
Well, there's
extremely
also
hyper.
there's a little fun like meta commentary there about about her because the whole number is about like, boy, why do I have to do all these like Oscar to use a term that's modern, an Oscar bait performance? Why do I have to do all these? Why can't I be sexy on screen like Betty Grable or there's a couple other stars of the time that she mentions. Ginger Rogers, for example. She's like, why can't I be these things? Which is, very interesting coming from her as someone who was built as a star as a young child.
and also it's interesting that she's the one who's most famous out of those people today.
Yeah,
People
absolutely.
still remember Judy Garland, not Ginger Rogers as much.
Well, I mean, it's also an obvious point, but I think it's one worth being explicit about. People are in this film playing themselves.
Yes.
Again, to further...
Well, sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But there are sequences where they are very... Even one of the last...
Yeah, Fred Astaire and Yellowfish.
Yeah, that's him. That's a real him. It's always been makeup.
He's like, my name's Fred Astaire and I endorse this.
Well, is it the last number or the number
would've.
before the last number? Because frankly, I stopped paying attention. When Gene Kelly and Fred
the second
Astaire
to last,
yeah.
shake hands on the bench. Like, they're going to great lengths to not have you under any illusions that these are actors necessarily in a narrative, which I think is an interesting dimension to where your point, Tanner, about like Judy Garland reflecting on her career is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But again, it just sort of adds to the fact that this just kind of feels like a mixing pot of a bunch of random shit.
Yeah. A quick aside, because thank you for mentioning that second to last number with Astaire and Kelly.
I quite like that one.
It's a
pretty
fun
good
one.
number. It's up there in my ranking of this
But
film.
to our
More Gene Kelly in this movie, please.
I agree. More Gene Kelly, yeah. To our previous point about like modern variety shows, I mentioned What If, and I'd like to rescind that because it's all like one creative voice, and I also felt that being like Star Wars and Marvel are the popular things. Anyway, quick aside, because I recognize that from Family Guy. I was like, oh, that's also like a modern variety show in a lot of ways.
What, Family Guy?
Family Guy.
America's Funniest Home Video.
America's Funniest Home Videos.
Actually,
it's all
yes.
of that.
What was the one we were watching on the free channel?
Oh
the other day?
yes, just like Epic Fails
Yeah,
TV
yeah.
or whatever the fuck. Yeah.
Can I just note, by the way,
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that Guzzler's gin is extremely funny.
It's
I just want to put that
absolutely.
out there.
But I have one note. If I were a producer on this film,
Yeah.
on that number, I would say, don't we think that the poet guy should also be drunk? Because I get the concept is that it's two different characters and we're cutting back and forth. But like, I just thought it'd be funnier if the poet guy was also getting visibly drunker. I don't know. That's just it was like I feel like it'd be funnier if the poet was also hammered.
Red Skelton is a great facial performer.
God,
My
it's
God, that guy
incredible.
can do some funny looks with his eyes and his mouth, and that sells the bit. It's funny. I think, yeah,
It's
you're
the best
totally
one.
right. That one. I don't know, the Borscht Belt lottery ticket one kind of has a special place in
pretty
my
good.
heart too, just because it's like it's
But also, Fanny
dumb.
Bryce, great facial performer,
yes.
doing some crazy things, pratfalling and pulling things out of her apron, and like I think that what really drives me nuts about this movie is I do not like Ziegfeld Follies. I like chunks of Ziegfeld Follies. I like the concept of Ziegfeld Follies. I like the production design of Ziegfeld Follies. But all the parts add up to be significantly less than the whole, and that is really, really annoying because I'm watching Judy.
The parts are greater than the whole.
No, they're less than because I like
No,
the
the-
parts,
no,
but I dislike the whole.
No, the parts are greater than the whole.
Yeah,
the whole is
you
less
don't like
than
the whole
parts.
product, but you
Oh,
like
wait.
the parts.
Wait, but isn't that okay?
Yeah.
My whatever. I don't fucking care.
Foot
You
in
get
mouth.
you get the
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
math
But
skills.
I'm watching Judy Garland give this performance where she's constantly flipping her hair back
Yeah,
and tap dancing around the room with 20 guys similarly dressed around her, and they're throwing their hands out. I'm like, this is really interesting.
yeah.
Or watching Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly do a tap dancing battle, like two masters of their craft.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, and their comedic timing is great, and they're obviously so good at this. They're like matching each other's legs. I'm like, that's so hard to train. Like, how do they do that? And Red Skelton and Fanny Bryce. I'm like, I'm enjoying these. Again, for me, mostly the comedic numbers. I think the vast majority of the musical numbers are actually really, really uninteresting.
They're yeah. I mean, I think we said it before, but like they're pretty to look at.
Yeah,
They're pretty to look at.
but there are
They go on
good
pretty
performances in
long.
this.
They go on and on and on most of the time.
The one I'm most impressed by of the dance numbers, since we've hardly mentioned them, I think, is the opening one, the underwater one, because I was like, that's underwater.
I
That's
like
pretty
the water
neat.
number.
That's the second
Well,
one.
the second one is the pink one where they're all
Pink
on
was
horses.
first.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then there's the woman on the horse, and she's like doing a thing. She's like mugging. At
Oh
the
yeah,
camera.
that's like the bring on the wonderful
That's-
girls.
Yeah. Oh, and then I wrote down some lines from that one because
Yeah.
this movie's also incredibly sexist.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
And because
If you can believe it.
because
Not to mention the yellow face, and not to mention the racial stereotypes during stop
Yep,
motion.
yep.
Also sexist.
because the pink number at the beginning transitions from Fred Astaire being on the stage saying this. Oh, and I almost forgot the girls. Ziggy was a specialist at glorifying girls. That's one of the most important things about the Follies, you know. And then it then proceeds to go through an entire sequence where I believe Lucille Ball is in it for like 5 seconds, and then this woman on a horse.
She's on the horse, I
No,
think.
she's the one with the whip who like
Yeah, she's like
do-
whipping cat women.
the cat girls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they look like Catwoman.
Yeah.
But then the woman on the horse is singing this song about how any man I see is for me. I just want a man. I just want a man. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, the entire point of this is just women are attractive. You want to see them on stage,
Yeah.
and every attractive woman in this show just wants a man. Any man. It doesn't matter who it is. It's really, really crazy how hard they go on the
Yeah.
sexism in this film.
Yeah. I think Florence Ziegfeld might have been sexist. You guys think that? Do you think so?
Yeah.
Leave your thoughts in the comments.
I hate to say it, but I have nothing else to remark about.
Let me look at my notes here a second. Let's look here.
I can't believe Tanner has notes for this movie.
Yeah. Let's see. No.
You
I
know,
think
that
that's
underwater
it.
sequence is pretty cool. We don't really get to see a whole lot of underwater stuff. Underwater choreography, that was like a real big fad. You know, I think I'll kind of wrap up some of my closing thoughts about the film in that the opening bits and Florence and Ziegfeld being up there in heaven looking down makes me think that the entire film is kind of trying to reminisce to remember when this film came out, 1945, war sucks, war's hell, everything got blown up. Let's remember to a time when that wasn't the case. The way that Ziegfeld begins reminiscing with, 1907,
back in the good days.
1907, what a great, yeah, that,
Remember
the
when I
good
had
days
my
when we all knew it
toys,
was
and
peace.
he's like, he's picking up like figurines of different actors, and he's like, man, they're just toys to me. And I'm like, Flo,
What are we doing here?
hold on.
But I think that the film is trying to get us to like be nostalgic
absolutely.
for a time period that is 100 years divorced from our time period. But, you know, I don't know. You use pretty sets and pretty clothes to make us be like, wow, things were good
Yeah.
back then. And look at how bad things are going to be going forward when this newfangled television comes into being.
Yeah. The thing about Ziegfeld Follies that I've been continuously bringing up, and again, none of this will be reflected in my score because I think this is a bad film. I did not enjoy it, but is this film almost more than some of the other ones of a similar type that we've seen helped catalyze to me that people really did like this. Like when we were talking about escapism, we're talking about like, oh, what's the point of going to see this? Is like most people couldn't go see a live performance. And the idea of reminiscing and having Ziegfeld Follies and Ziegfeld and these performances be something that was so culturally popular back then, and the only reason we're familiar with it is because we reviewed a biopic about that.
Yeah.
We would have no context if we had just dove straight into Ziegfeld Follies. But also the idea that the position of what this sits in, you're right, Timo, it's a World War II era film, but it also is after the Ziegfeld Follies themselves have faded out of popularity,
Yeah.
but it is at the peak of when MGM's star vehicles and the studio system and people like Gene Kelly and Judy Garland are just coming to like super popularity. And so Judy Garland and Gene Kelly, too young to have been in Ziegfeld Follies, but now we get to see this intersection of what would it have been like if there was a Ziegfeld Follies with people like with Lucille Ball and Gene Kelly, and that's really, really interesting, and you can understand why the 1945 audience that is feeling shit from the war and misses Ziegfeld Follies and loves Judy Garland and Gene Kelly wants
feel like shit, just want flow
yeah, absolutely. But you can understand them sitting in the stadium like, this is emotional to me because it's making me nostalgic for the time, and it's my favorite actors on screen, this big mishmash thing. And again, also in a type of film that is gone now, but was everywhere back then. There are like 15 of these Hollywood Review Gold Digger movies, Ziegfeld Follies, Ziegfeld Girls, The Great Ziegfeld. This was super popular back then. And so for me, watching something like the confluence of us watching something like Around the World in 80 Days and The Greatest Show on Earth, and now Ziegfeld Follies, it like clicks in my mind that even though I don't like this, and again, it will be reflected in my score, I love doing this research and discussion because it catalyzes how this taste has changed over the years. Of like, it makes no sense now, but like, can you fucking imagine? Like, this for me really does make sense as one of the winners of 1945 Palme d'Or. Of like, this is a super well produced, incredibly popular, appealing to it hits all the right notes of the time. Probably for them one of the greatest movies that year, but it's just like, we do not give a shit. We could not care less about Ziegfeld Follies.
Gene Kelly and Judy Garland, too young to be in Ziegfeld Follies, too old to go viral on TikTok. What a shameful time, I'd say.
I don't understand why people back in the day didn't just like watch clips on YouTube of the old Ziegfeld Follies.
That's true.
I agree. I would agree. You guys want some Palm details quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Just quickly. So again, this is an early Cannes Film Festival, so this is one of a number of winners for the 1947 Film Festival. This one won the Best Musical or Comedy award, I guess.
It's both.
It was the best psychological and love film.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get the best social film, best adventure and crime film. We'll get there all in due time, I'm sure. Other notable films that were in competition but did not win or did not share that highest prize include, there was A Ship to India by Ingmar Bergman. There was Crossfire by Edward Dmytryk. Sure.
They made an Xbox game about that.
Boomerang, Elia Kazan. So there were some names. There for sure. But yeah, I mean that's
and there's also some names in the films that did win, which we won't spoil now. But you know, perhaps if that old wheel falls in our favor, we get to do 2 45ers in a row, baby.
Close. Red Meadows was another one of these.
Yeah,
that was not that long ago.
Yeah. That was the first Cannes Film Festival. This is the second. Maybe we'll get something from the third Cannes Film Festival this time.
Holy shit.
I got a number in.
I got a number in my mind.
Let me put a number in.
Number.
I'm ready.
Yo.
I hit it. Oh wait, it didn't work. There we go.
Boom. we have a number.
That is.
It is a square 4.0 with the rounding, but a 4.0 nonetheless.
Best
Which is going
GPA.
to put it at the bottom.
True.
Yeah.
Very GPA.
Good job,
Ziegfeld,
Follies.
you are
Smartest
going to
kid
get
in
a good
school.
job. That's at the bottom. That's at place number 8 on the list. So, will we find a worse film on this list, or a film that we rated lower? Only time will tell, I suppose.
Certainly possible.
And only the spin wheel will tell us what film we are going to watch next week. Now, sadly, because I'm in Portugal still, you guys are just going to have to trust me on this one. But I've got your best
Okay, here we
interests
go.
at heart.
You have your best
Banner,
interest at heart,
just-
but you also have no control over this.
I don't get to see the wheel. I can't time it out perfectly like I always do. Ready, Timo?
Just sing for me like you're Judy
Sounds
Garland.
good. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
And the number is 12.
12.
Number
Okay.
12 gives us Antoine and Antoinette, directed by Jacques Becker and starring Roger Pigot,
Peugeot, I think.
Claire Maffei, Noel Roquevert, Gaston Madeau.
Uh-huh.
I'm guessing this is French.
Really?
And from 1947.
Same. So this will be the.
Very close.
No, I think it's the same Cannes Film Festival because I believe if we want to just go back down, this is the best psychological and love film
Whoa! Look at us.
from the 1947 film festival.
jinxed us.
Well, Antoine and Antoinette,
Yes.
Jacques Becker. I've never heard of any of these people.
No,
I've seen this movie.
is this
Liar.
probably
Liar.
88 minutes? Nice.
I can see some smoke coming out
This did
from
not-
Abram's pants
This
over
did not
there.
need to be a 2-hour movie.
No.
Ziegfeld Follies. Jesus Christ Almighty.
Oh yeah.
2
Well,
hours.
if you take off like the opening and the exit music, it's probably like what, an hour
that's a good point.
45-ish.
Also, if you watch it at higher than 1 time speed, doesn't.
Hey, the first time normal speed. First time normal speed. That's what I'll say. The second time was just a refresher, just a little
Yes.
fixer upper.
I did not watch the whole movie the second time. I skipped,
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
skipped quite a bit.
And hey, maybe that reflects in our discussion of this film.
And hey, that's just a
Yeah.
theory.
That's a BLB theory. Thanks for watching.
Well, thank you guys for figuring this one out, slogging through it twice. And you know what? Tucker has proven that there is still value to the films that we deride and that we do not like. But this is a good
This
case
is
for
Mike
that.
Lawrence.
Hey now. So, Antoine and Antoinette next week. Looking forward to that one. Staying here with the oldies and the goodies. Who knows what that's going to be like?
Shitties.
But-
Hey, this one is a 3.6 on Letterboxd.
Oh, that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, you know what I always say. Stay warm, keep cool. Peace.